what you did.
So in 2016, I was working as a federal contractor for the FBI in their cyber division, and I overheard a conversation that I couldn't ignore. It indicated that there was a massive cover going on of the forward funding investigation, and I basically had to make a decision. I had taken two oaths, one when I worked for the military, and one as a government employee, and that I would not allow, that I basically fight against, all domestic and foreign enemies. So I had a choice. I prayed about it, I'll be honest with you, for a few months because it was a very scary decision to make. And eventually I made the decision to walk out of the FBI with classified documents to hand them over to the proper authorities. Wow. And I took those to the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence, had a meeting with their senior staff member, and turned those over. At that time, he asked me if I'd go back in and get more information. So my face turned white at that moment because I was like, oh man, I thought I was done. And so I had to go back in, and I went back in to collect more information on what the FBI knew about the Russians' involvement in compromising our uranium supply chain. At the time that they were allowing the purchase of uranium-1, meaning the CFIUS committee. See, a lot of people don't know this, but the FBI director has a responsibility to the CFIUS committee to inform them of what they know that could be of a national security importance. And guess who was FBI director at the time that decision was being made to allow the purchase of uranium-1? Who would have had that information and would have known it because the date time stamp on those documents proved it. Robert Miller. So I handed over. I captured all of this other documents, and it was about 450 pages in total. I walked out of the FBI. They gave me an encrypted means of communicating with them, but I got no response. So here I am, on my last day at the FBI. I got no way to get rid of this information because I've been illegal, and I had this classified thumb drive that I'm thinking, and I screwed it. And so I did the only thing I could do. I took it home, I put it in my safe, and I contacted a lawyer. And I started going through the process of the Intelligence Community Whistleblower Protection Act. I got myself protected under that, and I handed over all of the documents to Inspector General Horowitz. We had a clandestine meet to set that up, and from that point on, I thought I was done until about 6 months later, the FBI showed up and raided my home. And for about a year after they raided me, they put our family through hell. And we had every single one of my kids, targeted. They went and interrogated several of our friends and family. We lived in a small, very, very small community. So, it doesn't take long, before friends stop calling you, because and it's not that they don't like you, it's just that they don't want the heat on them. And, it caused all kinds of problems in our life. But, what got me through it was my wife over there and her support for me. And more important than anything else, my relationship with Jesus Christ.
What can you share with everyone about the type of, because there's a crazy story you told me on our podcast about what happened inside the FBI with the folks around you when all of this was happening. Like if you can share that or any other detail about the information.
So the information related to 4 basic things, and when I say these 4 items, these were documents that the FBI had received. They had gone through, had analyst notes on them, and they had broken them down into 4 separate charges. They were public corruption, it was money laundering, securities and exchange fraud, and terrorism financing. Wow. So all of these things were related to various shell corporations, all leading to or there was also several other documents that were about other things that really haven't been discussed or talked about. There were some documents in there related to elections and particularly the electronic voting machines and what the FBI knew and what they were telling Congress, which was completely different. There were also documents about the Russians' involvement in trying to scam, do a kickback scheme with 10X and which was a company related to Uranium One. So there was a lot of information, like I said, 450 pages roughly, that got turned over. But really what it was about for me was, the intelligence community is so powerful. They have the ability to spy on every single American, okay, as well as people around the world. They have the ability to violate our rights under the Constitution through the FIVEPercenter program. And I've been very concerned since the first day that I was read on to several of those programs because I didn't see where there was accountability. And I was concerned that it was going to get abused at some point, and sure enough, it did. So for me, the two things that we have for us, okay, that are supposed to be keeping track of of this intelligence, the two groups that are made up of elected officials, okay, are the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence and the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence. They have authority to keep those guys in check. And they're the only ones that are actually elected by the people to hold them accountable. Yet, when Devin Nunes was going and trying to run an investigation to find out what they were doing, they were completely stonewalling him. They were not giving him the information that he was asking for. And I'm sitting there watching the CNN and I'm watching MSNBC saying things like, oh, it's very important. And the Democrats, in Congress were also saying, oh, the FBI is supposed to be an independent organization. Bull crap. They are not supposed to be independent because nobody in there has been voted for. Nobody in there has been elected by the American people. They don't have the right to do anything except by what the American people allow them to do. This is our country. They are our rights. They're not given to us by the government. They're given to us by God. And it's the government's, the whole purpose of government is to protect those rights. So that really ultimately is the crux of it. I wanted to make sure that these committees who were investigating these things were getting the information because what they were being told, and I was watching the committee hearings, what they were being told were complete lies. They were complete fabrications. So that's what I did. I took that information and I got it to the right people. And it was a painful and difficult experience, but I don't regret it, not one bit.
When this first happened, your name all of a sudden was flashed all over the news. There were reports written, and we're going to get into your experience, like with the FBI coming to your house, because I think it's terrifying. But before we do, when you see them holding up whistleblowers like Eric Ciaramella and Vindman, and then here you are after going through what you went through, you came to me and you were like, all right, that's enough, it's time.
Yeah.
I can't take this anymore. Tell me how that feels as someone who really jeopardized or sacrificed so much to see these frauds, for lack of a better word, being championed by the legacy media, and here you are.
Okay, so when I first blew the whistle, I had no intention of ever going public. I had spent 20 years of my career keeping a very low profile on the internet. I have a security clearance. I had to maintain that security clearance, and so I think I had like 3 followers on Twitter. And the only reason I even had an account was so I could see what the hell crazy thing Trump was going to say next, because it was just hilarious. And so I ended up getting exposed though, and when I blew the whistle, up until the point that my name came out, I was under a code name. I was authorized by Horowitz, MC Coda, which, for those of you that don't know what that stood for, like a backstory to this, my lawyer is a Cuban-American immigrant who came to this country after seeing his father put in a work camp. And so he has an absolute disdain for communism.
Yeah.
And so he chose he chose the name from the MC POTA, and I remember when I saw the documents and it said, you know, my client, MC POTA, who will here be called MC POTA. What is MC POTA? He goes, making communists pay out the ass. So when my name got exposed, and we don't know how it got exposed because, like I said, I had a code name. I was anonymous, and even Horowitz had authorized that, allowed for that. We suspect that somebody at the FBI leaked after they raided my house, because a reporter by the name of Richard Pollack, who was at the Daily Caller at the time, he's now with One American News. He contacted my lawyer and told my lawyer, said, hey, we've got our own spies, in the different news agencies, and we've got wind that there's going to be a hit piece coming out on your client named Cain, and if possible, we'd like to get your side of the story before that story comes out. And so, reluctantly, my lawyer, who for 30 years had never spoken to the press, he hates and despises the press. Sorry to all of you out there that are part of the press, but he told me, he called me up and he told me what was going on. He said, look, I think in your case, he said, I think I may need to, do this. I think it would probably be advisable. So I reluctantly said, yeah, go ahead. And so he did the interview. I actually did an interview with him. And of course, once that story came out, it went worldwide. Interestingly enough, I never once got a call from anybody in the liberal media, not once. I did have Fox News, Hannity. I was supposed to be on his show. They got canceled due to the George Bush funeral. And they tried to get me to come back on, so a lot of people wondered why I never went back on. And the reason is because at the time, I was trying to fight to save my job at the VA. And I had left the FBI after I heard the whistle and had taken a job at the VA. And the company I worked for, they said, basically made me a deal. They said, look, we will put you on administrative leave with pay, but we'd really like you to stay out of it if possible. So I was like, hey, no problem. I don't want to be there anyways. But, I had Tucker Carlson, Martha McCallum, the Five. They all tried to get me to come on their show. I kind of turned them all down because I didn't do this, to get famous. I didn't do this for money. I didn't do this for anything other than, believing that there are certain things that should not go unchecked in our country. So.
Yeah, that's right.
So for about a year, I was, the only thing that I did have was Richard Pollack had advised me. He said, do you have a Twitter account? I said, yeah, I got like a couple people on there. And he goes, you need to make sure and let people know what your Twitter account is. He said, because there are American citizens that are going to rally behind you and show their support. And what you're going to go through, you're going to need that support.
That's right.
He was right. He was right. I went, like I said, from having 3 followers on Twitter to about 80,000 now I'm at. And it was the constant, words of encouragement and the prayer. I asked for prayer a number of times where things were, and sometimes I couldn't even say what I was asking for prayer about. But, we had some things happen because somebody loosened the lug nuts on our car right before we had this long trip down to Kentucky. By the grace of God, we pulled over to get, I think to use the restroom or something. And I'm walking around the side of my car, and the lug nuts are all the way out to the end, of the front side. And, it's 70 miles an hour going down there. So, I had a couple of times where I'm pretty sure that, I may have been poisoned. So, there was things that had happened along the way to where I've asked people to pray, and they've been praying faithfully for us, and God has gotten us through it. So, financially, the legal bills at the end of it were about $200,000. This is one of the fundamentally flawed problems with Whistleblower Protection Act. It does not provide any kind of legal fees at all. It doesn't provide for that at all. So if you're a government employee, you might be able to get some help with with legal counsel provided by the government. But if you're a contractor, you're on your own.
Actually, you're really lucky that you were able to file, correct?
Yeah. So here's one of the problems. When I first, a lot of people have asked me, why didn't you just go to Inspector General Horowitz from the get-go? Well, for one thing, I didn't know anything about him. okay? You know, he was appointed by Obama. I do believe now he is a very honorable man. He made sure that my complaint, and I'll explain in a minute here, but I could not go to the intelligence community whistleblower, the intelligence community inspector general, which was Michael Atkinson.
Oh.
So Michael Atkinson was in my complaint. Okay, the reason why was he was in charge of the FBI's public corruption unit at the time that the Uranium One deal was going down. I could not go.
Well, hold on, just so people remember. Do you guys know who Michael Atkinson is?
No.
Do you remember the impeachment?
Yeah.
Do you remember the whistleblower complaint from the impeachment? He was the inspector general for the intelligence community who messed around with that, the one whose testimony we still don't have. He was responsible for that complaint, and
He changed the rules.
Yeah.
Okay? So you know, prior to the impeachment whistleblower, that's, you know, whistleblower.
Yeah.
He was the rules were you could not bring information, okay, for a complaint unless it was first-hand information. You could not bring second-hand information. That rule was changed by Michael Atkinson for that purpose. So he was part of as far as I'm concerned, he was part of the coup attempt. Our president.
So obviously Nate could have go to him with the information that implicates him.
That's right. I was also worried about going to Horowitz because, to be quite honest with you, the way the process works when you submit a whistleblower complaint, it goes to the IG. The IG reviews it and then he sends it up. Okay, to, in this case, it would have gone to the AG, to Jeff Sessions. And once it goes up to Jeff Sessions, it has to be given what's called a credibility rating. Okay, then it comes back down because this is what they call a matter of urgent concern. And so it comes back down. And then from there, I'm given authorization myself, okay, to take that information, which is why I had the thumb drive and why I was allowed to have it. Because I'm given authorization to take it myself in case a committee doesn't want to take it, or in case they take it and they do nothing with it, I can take it to another committee. But what happened was, and so I was worried about that because at the time, remember, Jeff Sessions had recused himself from everything related to Russia. Okay? So you know who the next person in line was? Rod Rosenstein. Okay, well, Rod Rosenstein was the he was the state's attorney, okay, for Maryland on the prosecution of that case that involved the Russian uranium trucks, the 10X case. And nothing had happened, okay, since 2009. So there was no prosecution. So I felt like he was probably dirty. He was probably involved in this somehow. And so he was in my complaint as well as Jim Comey, as well as Robert Mueller. And so I was really screwed. And so when I eventually I really kind of had no choice because I got raided by the FBI. They took possession of the thumb drive, and I knew, you know, so I knew that day could come, okay? I knew that all along from the moment that I made the decision to walk out there. I never covered my tracks. I didn't delete any log files or anything like that. I never did by the book because I knew that if they ever did come after me, I wanted to at least show that I was not trying to hide anything. So when I went to Horowitz and we did the drop, and I say the drop because here's what happened.
It's crazy.
So when I say we, I'm talking about my lawyer and myself. I was afraid for my life. You know, I'm dealing with the Clintons. I think everybody here understands that. So we took great measures to protect me, and to his credit, Horowitz, you know, agreed to and went along.
Don't tell Hillary I was at Comet Pizza.
We
Don't tell
set
her.
up a meeting at St. John's Church across from the White House. My lawyer and I got there early. We went inside, we got down on our knees and we prayed. We asked for God to protect us. And I sat on the front bench. I had, per the instruction of Horowitz, I had printed out 450 pages. It's like this thick of these documents. We asked him if he wanted the thumb drive. He said no. He said, I want you to print the documents out. So we followed his instructions. Had it double wrapped. And I'm sitting there on the front pew, and Michael goes back, meets with Horowitz's chief investigative counsel, and brings him in. And I had a hoodie and sunglasses on. I didn't want them getting pictures of me. I didn't want to say anything. I didn't want them getting voice analyzers, nothing. So they agreed to this. So when he tapped me on the shoulder, the instruction was I was to hand him the package over my shoulder. So that's exactly what happened. He walked in there. I had a hoodie and sunglasses on, and keeping my mouth shut. And when he tapped me on the shoulder, I handed the package over. And then he escorted him out, and we stayed there and prayed for a little bit more, and then made our way out of there and went our separate ways. And that was pretty much it until several months later, and Michael calls me up, and I'm guessing I was probably being surveilled at this time, and so that maybe this is how it happened. But Michael calls me up and he goes, I'm concerned because we need to figure out what to do with that thumb drive. And I'm like, yeah, you know what, you're right. I wonder if we can contact Horowitz or do something. And it wasn't a week after that conversation, the FBI was raiding my house.
Wow.
So,
Wow.
and so it was pretty intense. There was a lot of little miracles that happened along the way. The financial end of things, like I said, it was $200,000. When I first met Michael, I met him at his church. And so I didn't want to meet with him except in a public place, but somewhere where we could have a private conversation. And so he says, well, how about at St. Michael's? And I'm like, okay, all right, that works. I feel safe at the church. And so we went there, and that's where we met. And, when he asked me, he goes, are you independently wealthy? And I said, no. He says, do you have any rich relatives? I laughed at him. I'm like, no. And he said, well, I said, can't you do this pro bono? And then he laughed at me and said, no. And, because he said, the liability was just way too high. You're dealing with the FBI and the Clintons. And so he said, well, let me see if I can talk to some people. And he went down and spoke to a woman that he knew who was a philanthropist and told her my situation. Because I couldn't exactly put up a GoFundMe page, when I'm trying to keep it secret, right? And he talked to this woman, and she wrote a check for $200,000 covering all of my legal costs.
If you have any questions or you wanted to speak with him, he'll be outside where you can speak to him and ask him anything that you want. And share your Twitter account because there's a lot there.
Okay. It's at Cain, C-A-I-N, _Nate.
And if you want to hear an hour and a half of real in-depth on this story, I'm not trying to plug myself, it's just a great interview. The Dark to Light podcast, an interview with Nate Cain, and you guys can listen to that and really get the breadth of what happened to Nate. Thank you for being so brave.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you as well. I think it's break time.